What we've talked about here is to say that I'm most responsible, I'm most accountable, that each kid is unique, and that the goal is, my words, the 35-year-old version of them. I've also helped you to remember that you're not their friend, you're their dad, you're their mom. There's no outsourcing this work. Welcome to the Leveraging Success podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Every time that we're together, I want to help you to work less, make more, and use your leverage to live an extraordinary life. Take the success that you've got to be an incredible wife, husband, parent, and for you to be able to live an extraordinary life, one that God would recognize and reward in eternity. I'm so excited to be back here with you. This is another opportunity for us to talk and to keep the conversation going. What does it look like for us to live a life of leveraging our success? Now, to that extent, it's been a few weeks since I've been live here, and I've missed it very much. Funny thing happened on the way to the Wailea Tennis Club in Maui, where Heather and I were getting some time together, and while we were away, I happened to slip and break my ankle, and that changed all of our vacation plans. And while that all happened, it led to surgery, recovery, and I'm on my way towards that very quickly. But life changes so fast, and I'm grateful to be back with you. Thanks for staying subscribed to us and what we get to do here. I want to bring an important topic to you. And topics like these, they come up in the midst of being able to coach and consult with different other successful people. And the question that came up for me that I want to get right into with you is, how do I not become that overbearing father that I had? Now, for many of you, you had an archetype in your mother or father, and their example to you led you to say, I'm going to be exactly like them or nothing like them or some mix of that. And that archetype led you to start to say, well, it's going to fall into me, and how do I make this work? Now, I often talk to my clients and those that I get to work with that all of culture and even ourselves, we find ourselves swinging into the extremes. We can swing to the extremes of this question of being an overbearing father, or we can swing to the other extreme who tries to overly sugarcoat things, become the friend, not the parent, and go the other extreme, right? And overly stimulate or, spoil that child from being able to grow properly. And so the encouragement that we get from Scripture is to have admonition and encouragement. This is the ability to correct and encourage, to not wear them out, but not put them in such a sugary tasting world that all of a sudden they think that everything is like this and there's no such thing as pain in life. You know different. That's not how you achieve success. That success and greatness come from the strain, sometimes elongated pains, and oftentimes saying no to myself right now so that I can get that future self to be able to achieve a reward. And so often when I'm with clients or when I'm in a coaching scenario, I remind them of this. I say, look, I'm not your friend, I'm your coach. If I've made you laugh or I've made you have some sort of affection and we've got some joint affection with each other, that's good. But it's not the most important thing. In fact, if I'm not making you feel uncomfortable, if I'm not leading you to a place where you're feeling strain as I'm pushing you, I'm not doing my job. It's both this sort of hospitality meets the gym or a workout that says, I like having these conversations. I like being with you, but at the same time, you make me feel uncomfortable. But at the end of it, I always feel better. And so this is the role of the parent. And the parent's role isn't to befriend the child, although we're setting up for love because I want the best for you. There's so many reasons why I want to see you do even better than me. And so that is a part of who we are as parents, but we have to have some things in place that understand what parenting is, and it's certainly not friendship. Although affection and companionship can grow as time grows, but never can it trump my role. And so I want to take you through the 4 stages of child's development and your 4 roles in each of those things, and then some things for you to do at these stages, for you to be able to check, are you behind in this stage? And if you're behind, how do you catch up? Now, some premises here. As a parent, I'm thinking I need to hold the line. That's what admonition is, and keep them from losing hope. In fact, I want them to be full of hope all the time. And filling them up with hope is one of my roles, to see past the difficulties. When they're little and they're sick and they can't remember what healthy feels like, we're the ones that are helping them to hold on to hope. We're filling them with hope. We're telling them it's going to be okay and getting them the medicine and the doctors and the treatment that they need to press past that moment so that they can realize that in a dark period, they can trust us, that we're going to help them, and that it will only be for a period, and that you'll move out of that, God willing. And so these base foundation things that I want to set up with you is to understand how we help them through these stages. Now, first of all, we need to understand that I am the chief education officer. I am the chief spiritual officer in my family. And so I won't outsource that to someone else. I won't outsource it to my wife. I won't outsource it to a pastor, a youth pastor, a teacher. They are complementary to the agenda that I've got, to the leadership that I've got. And so as I think about this, I decide that I'm most responsible, and I'm not just putting in basics or solely casting vision and then walking away, but that I've got a real role to play that's going to have my direct input and work. Not now, with many people that are successful, your success has led you to a place with which you are primarily the chief communicating officer, the vision specialist, the strategist, the culture leader. And all of those are elements of being a parent, but you're also the manager, the supervisor, and sometimes the project manager that's overseeing and leading through directly the tasks, the goals, the next deliverables with your children. And so I want to set that as a foundation, is to say that I believe that I'm most responsible, most accountable, and that I want to have direct impact. Now, another tenet of this is to understand that each child is unique. They're all coming out completely different. And while we would like to make it so simple as to say, well, they got this percentage of my DNA and personality and this percentage of your personality, honey, and this is kind of who they are, but they're just so much more complex, because beyond the DNA, the proclivities that they're going to get from us, the habits, the culture, the beliefs, they're also living in a different time with different opportunities. And I just think about my children, my 2 sets of children that grew up in slightly different generations, and how different even their lives were between millennials and Gen Z, or to go back to how different our growing up at Gen X was from theirs. The opportunities are drastically different. The life's time frame is so different. And so while we can't compare them down to simplify, we have to just understand that there's some commonalities, there's some ways to trace, to say, I can see your mother in you, or oop, I see myself in you. It's just not that simple. The uniqueness is to understand that God has put a spiritual DNA in us that has all the distinctives that include my personality, my physical DNA, the time that I live, the story that I'm developing, my experiences. And all of that makes each of us as beings, as a once in eternity being, that God actually broke the mold when he made each one of my children, including me. And so that uniqueness cannot be templated. And so there's so much to be discovered. There's things to be discovered in personalities, outcomes, desires, what's going to happen. It's a story unto itself. So in this tenet that I'm bringing to you in your parenting and deciding, how am I going to be the right parent right now, is to understand each of them are unique, with different strengths, different weaknesses, different traps, different opportunities that need our guidance to be able to see that with them and see the uniqueness in them. The next tenet that's really important to me, and the thing that I have said to my children up until today, continue to say, is that I am fighting for the 35-year-old version of you. Now, this is a time frame where approximately 35, we can say in that range, we're in the middle of life. Now, could it be much later? To be exactly middle, sure. But I always think of 35 as the time with which I've got the greatest ability within my physical strength, and the time where next to my physical strength, I'm gaining wisdom. I've lived 15 or so years as an adult, many perhaps of those years on my own. I'm getting traction, I'm growing. And so that 35-year-old version is my target. Now, after they get past 35, my words to them is going to say, honey, guys, I'm going for your best life possible. I want you to have the best things that you can to make your eternity incredible. And so that best life possible becomes the shift. So if you've got kids that are under 35, having a vision for them at 35 is important. Why is that? Because having a vision for them is something that you're carrying in many years with which they cannot. They cannot imagine what it's like to be in their 30s or their 20s. And while you're thinking ahead, it's going to be the reason why sometimes you're saying no. Hey, listen, I'm saying no to you right now because I'm fighting for the 35-year-old version of you. And when you're 35, you're going to be thrilled at your outcomes because of the choices that I'm helping you to make right now. And you might not like this right now. You may not be able to see where I can see all the way to the 35-year-old version of you, but you're going to have to hang on because I can see it and I'm helping you to get there. Holding on to a vision and talking about it, in fact, fleshing it out with them and helping them to dream, is an important part of what we do. In fact, we say things like, hey, I can see someday when you're in your 30s and you have a family, and maybe they've expressed it to you that they want to be married and they want to have kids. And as you talk about that, you say, hey, I can see that day, and you're going to have an incredible marriage, and you're going to be able to raise kids that are going to follow your faith, and they are going to flourish and find their capabilities and be used by God. And you flesh these things into things with which helps them to imagine. Look, we are either helping people to imagine or they're starting to adopt what we've helped them to imagine. This is what leadership in our business was all about when we said, hey, within the next 3 years, this is what we're going to accomplish. This is what I can see. And then we help those around us to adopt that dream, that vision, that place that we're trying to take them to. And this is what we want to be able to set up for our kids, is to be able to see themselves in the best possible position, whether it's at 35 or for the rest of their life. Okay, so what we've talked about here is to say that I'm most responsible, I'm most accountable, that each kid is unique, and that the goal is, my words, the 35-year-old version of them. I've also helped you to remember that you're not their friend, you're their dad, you're their mom. There's no outsourcing this work. Now, perhaps you're listening to me and saying, okay, Jeff, you had me at, I don't want to become the overbearing father or mother or the bad version of a parent that I've seen before. What do I do? I'm feeling like I'm behind perhaps, or I'm getting overwhelmed. Okay, we're going to talk through that. I want to talk you through the stages of development, and then I'm going to associate the role, because your role is going to change within each of those stages. And then I'm going to talk to you about what do you do in these stages? What are some of your primary moves that you want to be thinking of? And then I want you to be able to, if you're afraid or feeling like you're behind in this stage, how do you move forward? And here's the surprise I think I'm going to get to at the end when I talk about the last stage, is the thing that I found. Let me explain a mistake that I made. I had a mindset that said, and it was underlying, I didn't necessarily vocalize it, but it was definitely in my mindset with my oldest daughter, which is at 18, you're off my payroll. You're supposed to go on and do your own thing. And then you're going to write letters back to me saying how it's going. But really, I've finished my job. I'm going to be relieved of duty, so to speak. Not exactly. I mean, not some sort of cut off a relationship. Far be it. I loved her dearly then as well. But what had to change in me is to understand that the need didn't go away with their supposed legal status of being an adult or finishing high school, that my role was now going to diminish. Here's another thing that I found even earlier than that was a frustrating lie that I was telling myself, is that as my kids get older, they need less of me. It was so wrong. I thought, oh, you're getting independent. You can dress yourself. You can feed yourself. You can get ready for school. You can go to school. And that means that I'm needed less, but it's the inverse. It's actually that I'm needed more, that my strategy, that my input, that my work and my thinking ahead is even more complex. And maybe if you're in the stage where you've got a very small one at home, a newborn, and you're looking at them thinking, this is the most stress I've ever been under. It's got to get easier. And that there are moments when it gets easier, those first nights when your children sleep or when they take their first step and things start to get momentum. But the complexities are growing and the need for you is not diminishing. So at all stages, the need for my personal work is growing. Even my presence and its value has to improve and sharpen and grow. And I'm improving, staying ahead of that curve if I'm doing it right. This is counterintuitive, or at least it was for me. I couldn't say that I've had incredible models with which to say, well, this is the book to how to parent, or here's the model. It wasn't until much later in life, after making a lot of mistakes, that I started to gather wisdom. And boy, isn't the School of Hard Knocks a great place with which to gather wisdom from. But I started to gather wisdom together and started to get inputs from more people, some of the best of whom were people like Bob Schenk, who's been a mentor to me for many years now, that helped to shape me into, I see the way that the best parents operate. All right, let's get into it. I want to explain these things. Maybe if you're tracking and you're looking for the notes on this, we'll have them in the show notes, but I'm going to encourage you. I've always found that the best opportunities for me is when I write some things down. So maybe you're going to write something or type something here to gather these 4 stages. And I'm going to tell you the stage, the role, what you'll do, and again, what to do if you feel like you're behind. Okay, let's get into it. The first stage, roughly in the age of 1 to 5, is the stage with which the child thinks that the world revolves around me. When a baby's born, every cry is met with food, is met with a diaper change, is met with being put to sleep, and every moment leads to their care. And so these first years, the feeling is that everything is about me, everything is caring for me. And if they're in a healthy environment, quite possibly they're thinking to themselves, the world is great. The world seems perfect. Now, at some point, whether it's the first time they skin their knee or get a cut or get sick, they start to realize, okay, the world isn't perfect. But here in these early stages of innocence, everything is about me. Now, here in this stage and early stages, our role is primarily in care. Okay. In fact, as you hear me talk about these roles, all four of these roles are starting with the letter C. This is caring. And why is that care so needed? It's because there's so many things that could hurt, damage, or drastically impact this young life. So caring is super important, whether they're going to play outside or you're letting them swim. There's just so many things, and even how they lay down as babies in a bed. Everything that you're thinking all the time is, how do I make sure that they don't die, don't do something that's going to impact the rest of your life. And really, during this stage, you have a high amount of hand-to-hand need for who's keeping control and care of the child at this time. But the do here is to pray. The main work for you in these days is to pray. Pray with them, pray for them, pray all the time. Now this role or this do isn't going away, but I think it's your primary do in these early days. Now, if you feel like you're behind or you're starting to get past this stage, or you're needing to shift as they're becoming more autonomous, the catch up is to just insert this. And you don't have to, although I really love scheduling prayer, is to allow yourself to pray anytime that it comes to mind, that you're with them and there's a moment with which you're going to grab their hand, you're going to put your hand on their head or back, and you're going to pray for them right then. And then in your heart or on your own or as a couple, you're just praying. This is the primary do, and it doesn't go away, but it's the primary do of this stage. Stage 2 is the next stage where the child starts to say, there's something not right here. And that question in this stage is starting to look at the world and saying, well, that didn't go like it should. There's some drama here. I've made mistakes. I'm seeing those mistakes. Things don't always go perfect. I thought it was all supposed to be perfect, but it's not all perfect. And I'm discovering more of the imperfections all the time. Some of the perfections are within me, around me, the things that I do. Now, your role in this second stage is as a cop. First stage was caring. This is all about being a cop. Now, what does a cop do? A cop makes sure to enforce the rules. Now, you're drawing the rules, enforcing the rules, and making sure whenever those rules are tripped that there's a law and order. Why is that? Because you're helping them to see safety. Now, what is not going to be said to you immediately when you're enforcing the rules and being the cop is that you're providing safety for them. You're actually providing comfort and safety for them when you play the role of cop. Now, they're not going to say that to you, like, thank you for disciplining me right now. I feel loved. I feel cared for. I feel safe. No, they're not going to voice it to you that way. But what I can tell you is in their subconscious, they'll know that this line is a line of protection. And when mom or dad are keeping me from that line, they're helping me to make sure that I stay safe because there's something not right here, and there are things that I need to be aware of, and they're helping me to be aware of those things. Now, the thing that you want to do, primary role for you at this time, is to read scripture with your children. Do a daily devotional and start opening up the Bible. Now, they won't comprehend much of it at first. You'll need to do the legwork of making it into a narrative, explaining the grander story, and making it palatable. So you don't want to go into probably a lot of Leviticus or Numbers or some of those prophetic books. You're going to stay into the narrative so they're getting the bigger narrative story. And what narrative are you wanting them to understand? Is that we live as foreigners in a trapped world where everything has turned imperfect. And the imperfections that you're seeing is a part of the curse. And there's only one solution to that curse, and that's Jesus. And so I'm helping them to start to get the bigger picture. This doing of taking them through scripture is to foster an understanding of the grand story that we're all living, the broken world, the God that meant it to be perfect. We broke it. And that curse that was released onto humanity is now only rescued through Christ. And so this is the opportunity for them to start to understand who God is and their need for Jesus. Okay, this is your primary do. Now, if you're finding yourself in the second stage where you're copying them and you're feeling behind, and by the way, if there's a way for you to tell whether you're behind or not, it's very simply as you're hearing me say these words and you're thinking about it. If you're afraid, you're behind, right? You're going to be filled with confidence if you're already doing these things. Now, I want to help you to get past this, and it's just very simple. Start today. Start today and make a routine out of reading scripture frequently. This morning, again, my sons and I, we meet like we always do every morning, and we're going through scripture together. And they understand now as teenagers the narrative quite well. They are finding insights. We go through 3 questions every time we read something in scripture is, what does this say about God? What does this say about man? What is God telling me? And those 3 simple questions that I rephrase and reframe, but basically stay around those 3 questions, allow for them to continue to chew, process through this. Now, just like prayer is not going to go away in that first stage, reading scripture with your children doesn't go away either. It's not going to go away. The install of this in this second stage is the thing to do. And if you're feeling behind, start today. Don't wait. Just start that process. Create a schedule and hold the schedule. I'll tell you a quick story. My son, who is in his senior year of high school, I've set up some financial goals for him, and he got his first paycheck. And really, without concentrating on it, you know how money that hits your bank account can be like warm butter on a hot skillet. It quickly evaporates. And so what I was telling Zach at that time was, hey, listen, money needs to be stubbornly led by you, or money will stubbornly lead you. You have to choose to lead it, to make it conform to your will. And so it's the same thing that goes with these priorities. This priority of reading scripture, it needs to stubbornly be inserted. Now, you miss a day or someone's sick or something just pops up, right? You miss one, you just get back on the horse and you do it the next time. And that momentum will not let anyone think, once you've been doing it for months or years, if you missed one day that, oh my goodness, we've stopped our habit. No, you're going to know it's going to have that steamroll. Okay, first stage is care. Second stage for you, or second role for you in the second stage is to cop. Now, remember, this second stage is the stage where your children have been saying, there's something not right here, and I'm not sure what it is. The next stage is the tough one. It's the one that we enter into adolescence or prepubescence, where we say, actually, the problem is me. I'm the problem here. And as I start to believe that I'm the problem, the world starts to close in. And I think there's things that are wrong with me. I don't like my personality. Do they like me or not? Am I accepted? Am I good enough? Do I have enough? And all of those questions will start to appear. Now, each child is going to handle that differently. Certainly, we've seen a rise in the amount of child psychology that's going on today, and that amount of needs have just come up because these questions that seem to be getting louder, and I think the reason that they get louder is because of social media. And what does social media do? It speeds up comparison, and comparison is the thief of joy. And when I, and especially as an adolescent, start saying, well, what do they have that I don't have? And what am I missing? And what do they got that I wish I had? All of that comparison starts to break down and then can lead to a momentum builder of me believing that I'm the problem here. I'm what's wrong in this world. If perhaps, God forbid, if I perhaps weren't here, this would all be solved. I hate that track, but this is the track that we want to prevent that slippery slope from happening. So what is our role in this stage? The third C here is to coach. Now, like I described to you earlier when I said about my coaching role, is that I understand I'm not a friend, that I'm pushing. And any good coach gets people to be sweating, straining. At times you want to tell that coach, you know where you can go. Get out of my face. And that's okay, right? That's the stage because we're pushing. Now, you have to find the right balance here of wearing them out, right? Is that you want their bodies, just like our hearts. The more that we strain in our hearts, the greater our capacity to strain is, the further we can go. Perhaps as an example, like running, the more that we do it, the more that we can add time and strain to a heart that's building. Well, this is our coaching work at this stage, is to strain them to the right amount that they can handle and being slightly unreasonable. Look, in leadership, you have to be slightly unreasonable. In your business, you have to be slightly unreasonable or you'll never get anywhere. Well, in your parenting and your coaching at this stage, it's going to be important to be slightly unreasonable, to expect more than the minimum requirements. So we want to stimulate that. We want to teach that. We want to coach that, is do more than the minimum, go further, and that I'm going to strain you. And I'm going to use these words. Like I may say to my kids, I'm copying you, or I'm coaching you right now. And someday I'm not going to be your coach. I'm going to explain what that next stage is in a minute. But right now I'm coaching you because I'm playing for the best version of you. And when you leave this home, I want you to have created the disciplines, everything from brushing your teeth to making your bed to cleaning your room to doing your homework to being ahead and being early, not on time, not late, and staying ahead, living with margin, because you're going to accumulate margin and that's going to create an extraordinary life. Coach. Now, every good coach knows that with that admonition, that pushing, you need to also acknowledge, encourage, fill with hope. Give them the well done and I'm with you and that's so great, I'm excited, and all of those things, right? It's not just a balance with which we've tried to throw off any capability for them to hope. We're not trying to grind them to a place with which they say, I just want out of here. I think that that's a really tough spot for our kids to be at, is that the motivation to leave is just because they're miserable here and they've been ground to the ground all the way down. But so we need to find that tension, that right amount. And that's the fact of the matter is that you can't do this passively. There's no blood test or quick breath test from your kids to say, how are we doing? You have to be involved with them. And you remember what I told you earlier, is that they don't need less of you, they need more of you. And if the only time that you're really spending meaningful time with them is on the bookends of a day or the bookends of a week, it's not enough. And it's why we're trying to achieve margin in our success. Because if we want to be extraordinary parents, we're looking for ways to get margin back from our career so that it doesn't overshadow all of our lives. That the work that we do, while we love it and are successful with it, that we hold back enough time with which to be present at the events, present when they're home as much as we can be, and allow for that margin that we've got to coach, to be with them. For me, I've got standing dates with my children, not only our best days that we do every year, but standing dates during the week with which I'm calling, touching base, or meeting in person. And that touching is the moment with which we continue to input into them. So coaching here is really important. The big do for them is to get the disciplines installed in this coaching stage. If you're feeling behind at this point, you're going to have to grind a little bit harder. Imagining that You're someone, as an example of someone who is a couple 100 pounds overweight, right? Who's way behind in their health. Well, the first 100 pounds, 200 pounds, you're going to be the work of just getting the momentum going. But faithfulness is the move if you're feeling behind, if you're feeling afraid, is to start to make sure that the important disciplines are in place and that you continue to coach, and sometimes cop, but coach to push. Now, you may have to revert to the cop stage, by the way, if you're feeling behind. Like, you didn't install the do's and don'ts. You didn't establish the hard line. Well, you may need to blend cop and coach here in the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years of them living under your roof to get caught up. So move into some more copping if you need to define the lines, get into the coaching, and put both of those things into play. Here we said pray, read scripture, get disciplines in place. These are the first 3 stages. Now, the next stage I'm going to blend because there's 2 things that are going to happen in this adult stage. The first part of the adult stage is actually the problem isn't me, it's the world that's wrong. And I've got all the answers to why the world's wrong. I don't know why you guys haven't figured it out. You who are adults, I can see the problems and I believe that I can solve them. And this is the young adult stage with which we start to believe that if you just do the obvious thing, the world would be a great place and I've got all the answers. And then they shift. If they're getting healthier and stronger, they shift into, I have an answer for the world. God has given me an answer for the world. Now, your role in both of these stages here at the end of adulthood is as consultant. You are caring, you are copying, you are coaching, and at some point now you're consulting. Now, some of that may be because they're not living with you anymore and they're sailing their own boat. And as they're sailing that boat, I want to be a resource of wisdom so that I can consult. Now, consultation is something that is an invited work, not a work that's pressed upon. Coaching is pressed upon. Like, you don't have any choice. I'm coaching you today. Right now, I'm coaching you. But a consultant's work is invited. It's, hey, I've got a question for you. What would you do with, or how come this always happens this way? Or what would you do if you were me? Those moments are gold, right? In the adult stage, we enter into a consultancy. Now, if you're not continuing to build your wisdom base, your children and their wisdom quite possibly will outstrip yours, and you will no longer have something that they don't have. So for the rest of your life, you're not only praying with them, reading scripture with them, helping them to reinforce disciplines in their life, but you also are working to build your wisdom and experience. And the more that you're reading, going through things and not giving up, not saying, I've learned enough, I don't need to learn anymore, I'm going to cut the engines and just float home, and I've got enough with which I can answer what to do when you're going to the DMV, or how to deal with this situation legally, or all these sort of adult things. It's not enough. It'll last you for a little while, maybe their 20s, perhaps their 30s. But if you want to be the invited consultant, you have to continue to grow your wisdom base, your experience, your influence has to continue to grow. And these are things that are really sought after by developing yourself, right? I don't get influence by saying, hey, you must be influenced by me. I can't demand by authority influence. Now, the first 3 roles that I had were authoritarian in nature. But this role here is not authoritarian. It's one that's really influence driven. So how do I get influence? Well, I have to be attractive. And the attraction comes from insights, experiences, success, inputs that are helpful and not unwanted or unrequested. So for you, as you consider this stage, you're trying to be a consultant. And the thing for you to do is to primarily develop yourself for the rest of your life and to continue to grow in influence and a love that attracts, because influence attracts, not authority. You're no longer a authority to demand. Of course, we're expecting them to honor us, but if I have to tell them to honor me as a parent, I'm behind in this stage. So if you're behind here in this stage, you're going to want to be extremely generous in your love and extremely focused on your self-development, to develop life mastery, to extend your life mission. And as you develop those things that we primarily focus on in the master's program, you're developing a life that influences and leads your children to ask questions. Is there anything better than when your child says, "What would you do if you were me?" Or "When you were my age, did you?" Man, just those are gold moments. All right. Now you understand care, copying, coaching, consulting, the stages of development, your roles and how they interface to them, what your primary do's are in those moments, and if you're behind, what you should be doing. I hope this is helpful to you, because when I had this conversation with one of my clients, and it's not the first time that it's come up, is to say, how do I become the right parent at this moment, is to understand the role. And there's no becoming overly dictatorship, that's focused on high amount of authority and control and making this all work. And nor is the pendulum swing back to, I just want you to like me. I want you to feel good, always be happy. Those pendulum swings keep us from the right spot. And this is what you're going to find over and over again. It's that our God, through Scripture, has these tensions that don't allow for us to overly simplify things into extremes. There's this tension that we are encouraged to do, which is to be a parent that's full of admonition and encouragement. And those two things are not to be 100% of either singularly, but 100% of both all the time. It's like the description that John had in the first chapter of his gospel written about Jesus. He said that Jesus was full of truth and full of grace at the same time. That 100% of both is an aspiration, but it's a tension that has to be nurtured, because our flesh, simplicity, we'd rather just let that happen and be the thing that we're after. All right. I hope this has been helpful to you. I really enjoy this journey. I'm glad to be back here again, starting to produce some more podcasts. If you're enjoying this, would you please subscribe? If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell. If you're taking this in through a podcast, subscribe to this podcast. And we'd love to continue to support you on this journey. My goal, my passion, the thing that gets me excited, is to see what would it look like if the pent-up power that's in the pews in our churches would be unleashed in the kingdom, that successful business leaders could leverage that for an eternity that would matter forever, that we wouldn't look to Christian celebrities or the guy that's on stage to say that you're the one that's responsible for this, and I just need you to tell me how to get my best life now. No, I'm thinking about how do we unleash my success into something that will last forever. So hey, if you've got a question, I'd love to field it live. You can email me directly at jeff@leveragingsuccesspodcast.com. I'd love to field your question. Hey, and if you want to learn more about the master's program, there's a link here in the notes. Or if you want to email me and ask me about the master's program, I'm happy to tell you about that as well. Hey, every time that we're together, I want you to be on a track that would live an extraordinary life for the rest of your life, to believe that the rest of your life is the best of your life. Until next time, I'm Jeff Gerhardt, your host here on Leveraging Success. God bless you.